welcome to the 21st episode of the Thespian podcast. On today's episode, we talk to the amazingly talented, gifted actor, and all-around amazing human being, Corey Weiser. We're going to talk all things acting, all things behind the scenes, as he does work backstage as well. So, without further ado, let's hop into episode 21 of the Thespian podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 21st episode of the Thespian podcast. On today's episode, we talk to the amazingly talented, gifted actor, and all-around lovely human being, Corey Weiser. How are you, bud?
I'm good, thank you. That was such a nice introduction.
You are welcome.
I'm doing well.
Good.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And it's a great time. It's the season, as a lot of people like to say.
Indeed, yeah.
And I hope, especially this year, that people can kind of find some happiness during this time, because it's a crazy year, guys. It really is. And a lot of our holidays have been different, to say the least.
For sure.
But, I mean, hopefully Christmas is, it's always, they say, the most wonderful time of the year. But let's try and make it as wonderful as possible this year.
Yeah.
And as I always say, guys, you guys know what to do, especially in COVID times. Wear a mask, wash your hands. Hand sanitizer is your best friend. And so you guys know what to do. And if you guys like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube. And let us know what you guys think about our audio version, which is always down below. Also, all our links are down below, so guys, go check those out. So, without further ado, let's hop into some questions with Corey.
All right.
So, the first question I always ask on here is, how exactly did you get into theater?
Well, I can remember when I was in elementary school, a friend of mine, whenever I would go to his house, his older sister would write these scripts. They're pretty short, maybe 5-10 minutes at the most. And she'd give them to us, and we'd practice it maybe 3 or 4 times, and then they'd go call their parents into the living room, and we'd perform it for them. And I remember just having so much fun, just being super extra with everything. When I was a kid, I just remember I wasn't really afraid of anything. I wasn't afraid to look silly. I liked looking silly because it made people laugh. So then that, I guess, sparked it. And then I remember my older sister, when she was in high school, she took a drama class, and she had a presentation one day, and I went to go see it, and I thought, wow, I really want to do this. So I think that was really what cemented it for me.
That's great. I mean, I've been saying to a lot of the guests, it's either something that it's a family member, or it's something that just clicks when you're young. I find, where it's just randomly, okay, one, you wanted people to laugh and wanted to be seen, but two, it's also just when you have those those moments as a kid where you're just like, you're smiling from ear to ear and you're like, this is fun. And
Exactly.
they said in theater school that like sometimes you just have to bring your inner kid out, right? And
Yeah.
that's basically what theater really comes down to, especially with some of the clown roles, some of the things that we need to do at Abbott. So you were still at Abbott. So how is both programs? Because I know you've done both.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what have you learned? What has been the most defining moment you find in both acting and in design?
Tech.
Tech, I mean, yes. Tech.
That's a good question. I mean, both programs definitely have like their ups and downs. Um, I think I think one of the biggest differences between the programs is um, the amount of hands-on work for tech obviously is much more than in acting. You know, when you're in acting, it's a lot of research for roles, it's a lot of reading scripts and all that, and we still have to do a lot of research and reading in tech. But most of the work is, you know, building sets. You're learning how to hang lights, how to program a lighting board, how to run it, how to do stage management, which is what really brought me into tech in the first place. So it's a lot of, you know, like in-class hands-on learning. So a lot more of like classic type of school. Well, acting is a lot more creative and it's a lot more, you know, in your head and a lot more like building over a long period of time. So it's in tech, I'd say it's more of like instant gratification kind of thing where it's like, oh, look what I built today. This is it. This is done. I can check it off my list. Whereas for acting, it's like, you know, a long process. And then by the time the show's done, you're not necessarily done with it. You know, like there's still more you could do. So that's one of the biggest differences. I'd say for like the most defining moments, I think in acting was when I was doing a rehearsal. I think this was in second year. We were working on Our Town, and I was playing Professor Willard, and I had he has this monologue towards the beginning of the play. Well, it's his one scene actually. He has this monologue, and it's all like the scientific, you know, historical kind of mumbo jumbo, but it's based in reality. But he just kind of, you know, goes on this rant, and I could never really figure out how to do it. And then the director Terry told me, you know, just have fun with it. It doesn't matter because most people in the audience aren't going to understand what you're saying. So you may as well just have fun with it and make it your own. Just do it so that you're having fun, because if you're having fun, the audience is going to have fun. So during that rehearsal, I just kind of got up and I started doing it. And I think without realizing it, I had kind of started talking like this, and I was just delivering all this information like with my mouth like this. And then I saw that I was standing in front of Terry, and I saw he started kind of mimicking me, and I was like, oh, and then he was laughing. It was like, oh yeah, you just have fun. Like the most important thing, no matter what the role is, even if it's a very serious, dramatic role, you can still have fun with it. Doesn't mean that you're going to make people laugh. Doesn't mean that you're going to be laughing about it, but have fun. You know, if it feels good, then you know you're doing something right. Yeah. For tech, do you want me to keep going?
I mean, you can. I just wanted to add in that I feel like that's why, like we call it a play. You know what I mean? Where it's just like we just go out and have fun. And I found for me, when my last show that I did at Abbott, I was this horse courser who realistically many people probably didn't understand the accent, but it was so fun just to go out and connect to the audience and make everyone laugh. And I feel like they may not understand the story perfectly, but just doing that every night gives you the joy of, okay, I do know this character, but it's also just, it brings you joy. And I feel like there's part of it that kind of sheds over to the audience, even if they don't understand what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Where was I? Oh, sorry, my phone's going off. What was I saying about tech? A defining moment in tech. I think it would have to be, this is tough. Honestly, I think one of the highlights for me definitely was I was the assistant stage manager for, well, the first assistant stage manager. There were two in the end for the show, for Peter and the Starcatcher, and it was, the first show that I had worked on, the first full show that I had worked on as a tech student. Before that, I had worked on like a twice a week basis on the shows the year before that. So this year is, like you go until week 9 with your classes, and then you're full time working on the show. So I really enjoyed getting to work with the cast, getting to sit at the table and watch and actually like understand what's going on at the other side of the table, because usually the way we work at Abbott is like in the studio. We have the table set up for the director, stage manager, and anyone else who's watching, like lighting designers, sound designers. And then the actors are usually all, doing their thing for the rehearsal. So it was interesting getting to sit behind the table and know what was going on and know all the little pieces that have to fit together to make everything work. And in the end, actually getting to do the show, it was probably one of the most fulfilling things that I've done so far, because it felt like what I want to do further on after school. It really brought that feeling of like, okay, this is a professional show now. Like this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to learn. This is what I want to do.
It must be great to wear so many hats, especially in theater. I know I've definitely wanted to like jump into other platforms other than just acting, but it must be great to kind of see both behind the scenes and know what's happening on stage and what they had to prepare as well. But before we hop into the backstage, I actually want to hop into some of the roles that you played, because
Sure.
You had some great roles at your time in Abbott.
Yeah.
So the first one that I'm going to actually bring up is in The Crucible. How was jumping into Arthur Miller's amazing play?
It was rough. I think overall the cast had trouble connecting with it because we didn't really understand the gravity of it, and that was something that we had to work on as a whole, like as a cohesive group. But once we got into it, it was heavy, and the reality of the situation is these people were being killed because of what other people said about them, but more importantly, what they thought about them. So there's this woman, Sarah Good, who's poor, and I think she was also homeless. And so everyone kind of looks down on her, and she's in like tattered rags. And so someone claims that she's a witch, and because of that, she dies. It says a lot about a society and what the power of a society is. It says a lot about poverty. It says a lot about reputation. So it was really heavy having to get into all that, but it was still an enjoyable experience for sure. It was really interesting because that was my first show on the main stage. So it was the first time that we were working also with some of the third year students at the time. I was in my second year. So it was interesting getting to watch them work as well. And Arthur Miller is always amazing. His stories are always so well written, and it always flows so smoothly. So it was great getting to work with that script.
Honestly, I still remember The Crucible like it was yesterday, because one, the set was incredible, the lighting was phenomenal, but the acting too. It was just, I don't know. It could have been just the fact that I was in first year, and oh my god, the second years and third years are doing amazing work. But it was just coming in and seeing a classic that it was the first play I ever read. Yeah, which I know seems very weird because it's very complex. But it was great to actually see it done, because unfortunately the Crucible doesn't get done as often as it should. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting because it's still so relevant. It was written as a commentary about the Red Scare and about communism, and so yes, it's about that, but it can still be related to so many other things that are happening today. When we did it, it was right around the time that Trump got elected. So there was all his shenanigans going on in the States. So I think that was something the director really wanted to try and relate between the play and what was happening in real life. So there's a lot of things that it can still relate to because it is so relevant. It's kind of like Shakespeare in that way. Like Shakespeare's plays were written hundreds of years ago, but they're still put on because they're about people. You know, it's about the human experience. So everyone can still relate to it on some level. Arthur Miller, I haven't read all of his works, but from the ones that I have so far, it's about people's experiences. So it's still so relevant. And yeah, I think the Crucible people should be putting it on a bit more often.
You heard it here first, guys. It needs to happen more.
Yeah.
After COVID, more than likely, because it's a huge cast for the Crucible. But yeah, actually, that's a great segue to hop into the next role that we're going to hop into. We've already touched on it a bit in Shakespeare Sit-Downs, which you guys need to go check out. It's out. Yes. And it's great. So you guys definitely should go check that out. It's down below. But A Midsummer Night's Dream, how is playing in one of Shakespeare's most fantastic and most fantasy, I guess you can say,
for sure,
play? How was that?
That was probably I think I said it when we did Shakespeare Sit-Downs, but that was probably the one play I had the most fun doing at Abbott. It was I played Peter Quince, who was one of the mechanicals, and they're really of the entire play, they're like the clowns of the play. So that's really, like we were just talking about before, it's one of the roles where you can really just, you know, have fun and like bring out your inner kid to just have a blast with it. And again, like there was one moment in rehearsals where I think it was just the mechanicals, and we had I think we had Nadia sitting in the wardrobe technician and a few other people. It was kind of like a closed rehearsal just for the mechanicals, but we had a few people come in. And right at the end, I think it's the last scene of the play, the mechanicals are putting on their play within the play for the royals. And Peter Quince has this little prologue that he has to give, so that, you know, because earlier in the play they talk about, oh, but what if the lion scares them, or what if they don't understand that, you know, the guy who's playing Pyramus isn't really killing himself. So he has to give this prologue that's kind of explaining, you know, like oh, I hope we don't offend you, I hope we don't scare you. But it was kind of a hard thing to do because it's kind of explaining, it's a lot of it just explaining. So there was one time we were just kind of doing it over and over again, and again with Terry, he was pushing, and then there's one time I just kind of said, okay, like, screw it, and I just went and I just like just kind of ran through all the lines. I just like said them all like in one breath as much as I could, and then as soon as I ran out of breath, I did like just a huge like and then kept going. And I think that was how we kept it from then on. Like, you just gotta have fun, folks. Just
you
have
really
fun.
do. And like, especially, I don't know, I might be a bit biased because I love Shakespeare, but watching that, I think the audience was laughing from start to finish. In Midsummer, it really felt like it. And I don't know if like it's just a testament of the acting that we're seeing in the Shakespeare lines, but it was just, everyone was just like gut laughing, you know what I mean? Like really, really laughing at those scenes, especially the mechanicals, because my God, there's something about them. There's something about them that's transcendent. There's a reason why you don't usually get a group of clowns in Shakespeare, I find, is because sometimes it can almost feel overwhelming when there's too many clowns that come in. But with Midsummer, it's so great because you have Snug, you have these like smaller characters, but then you have these larger than life characters, Bottom, Flute, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the reason it works so well is that all the characters are so different, and they're all written so well. Like they have their own personalities. They're also like well fleshed out. You really get the sense of who they are right from the start. So I think that's why it works as such a big group for clowns. Is that like it's not just the same joke over and over again. It's like actually like these people are all contributing their own thing. Yeah, it was so much fun to play with. I miss those people. I think we got really close, especially the mechanicals.
I bet. It's like you become a troupe, but you also become like this family, especially in our program that we did. I mean, it's lovely.
Yeah.
So actually, before we hop into the next role that we're going to talk about, I actually want to ask, do you have any words of wisdom for people that might want to jump into that program or also jump into tech?
I think in general, especially if you're coming from high school, it's a bit of a shock to the system because not only is it a CJEP level program, but it's also the professional theater program. And it tends to feel like you're getting a lot of work, and most of the time you are getting a lot of work to do. So it's really important to schedule, to plan when you're doing your things, your work, make sure you're doing everything on time. You're not saving it all for the last minute, because I did that and it does not feel good. And it takes away a lot from what you're learning. If you're worried about, oh, I have this journal that I was supposed to hand in 2 days ago, then you're not focusing on learning your lines for this other exercise that you're supposed to do in another class, you know? So make sure that you're on top of your stuff. And then other than that, I kind of hesitate to say this, but for the most part, unless you're going to a high school that had a really, really excellent drama department or theater department, try not to bring that stuff with you. You know, try to come in as like a clean slate, like fresh, because a lot of the time what you've learned in the past is good, it's useful, but it's not really the kind of thing that you need when you're going into acting, specifically. um, you know, you want to be willing to learn. You don't want to be thinking, oh, but this goes against what my high school teacher said, so I'm not going to listen to this, I'm going to keep doing it this way. For the most part, like, these people, I can't speak for all high school drama teachers, but the people in our department have had careers working in theater professionally, and this isn't to say that they're better than or anything like that. It's just they know from personal experience. So really, like, what they're giving you is really useful information, and you should try and keep these little wisdoms that they pass down, because it'll help you in the long run for sure.
Lovely put. Because guys, the chip on your shoulder is going to be broken very, very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the thing is, like, there's no competition. There shouldn't
Yeah.
be, especially in the education system, because
Mm-hmm.
overall it's school. But it's true. You really have to stay on top of your stuff, because the problem is everything gets backlogged, right? And you do still have to perform usually almost every day,
Mm-hmm.
several times a day. So it's just getting your schedule in your head and knowing I need to do this, and especially if you want to
Yeah.
go into acting.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, you guys are going to get sized 2 days before, maybe one day before. You guys are going to have to get into that mindset of I need to do it now. If I don't do it
Yeah.
now, I might not get the job that I need to get. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's honestly that cutthroat, and I never sugarcoat anything on here, because reality is, guys, I want to be truthful with you. It's a tough business. It's
Yeah.
lovely when you're in it, but it's also very tough. It's nothing. It's you either get it or you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't do the work, chances are you don't get it. It's
Yeah.
it's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's a great thing about the program is they tend to not sugarcoat things either. You know, they just give it to you how it is. When you're doing shows in the program, it's very much run like a professional show. It's still, you know, they take into consideration that you're still in school, so they're you know, not going to be too hard on you. Like, they want to make sure that you're still learning. They know that you're still learning. But they raise the bar, and you know, they have expectations, and every semester, every show you do, the bar gets higher and higher. So you know, by the time you graduate, you should be ready to go out into the professional world and just ready to do. uh, so you know, like, if you're having trouble with something, you know, you need to work on it, because when opening night comes, that's it. You know, in the professional world, opening night is the deadline. If you're doing a show, you know, that's when everything, you do previews, and then everything is supposed to be like set. So you got to make sure that you're on top of your stuff.
That's why they call it professional theater, guys. And
Yeah.
even if you go into ALC, reality is too. Even though it is not called professional theater, and it's not really the main component. You guys still do a theater show, and unfortunately or fortunately, you have to meet that deadline, like Corey just said. Where opening night happens, people do pay money to come see you, and reality is they want their money's worth. So that means you guys need to do what you guys need to do, right? But let's shift gears into another role that you did. So let's talk about one of the great roles that you did, and we were actually both part of the show, 15 Dogs.
Yeah.
How was doing such a different show with 15 Dogs and Zach Fraser?
So I was really, really excited to get to work with Zach because up until that point, he'd only been one of our teachers. We hadn't really worked with him as a director. So I was super excited for that. Also because it was a new work. It was, I can't remember the word right now. It was a adaptation. Thank you. It was an adaptation piece from the novel 15 Dogs by Andre Alexis. So what we were doing, it was a new script, and getting to work with a new script is really, really interesting because it's changing all the time. I had my role of Miguel, one of the owners of one of the 15 Dogs, but also as a storyteller. And originally, as one of the storytellers, I had huge chunks of text, and I was like, all right, let's do this. I'm going to be studying my lines all the time. I'm going to be running through them. And then slowly over the course of the semester, parts kept getting cut and cut and cut. And at first, honestly, I'm going to be really honest. At first, it was kind of a relief because it just gives a little bit less pressure. But also it started to get a little bit nerve-wracking again because it was like, oh God, well, what if I spent so much time on these lines? What if I forget that they're cut? What if I just keep going by accident? And then I realized, you know what, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Just keep working on the new lines, work on the updated script, and just do the work. If you say something that was cut, odds are it's not gonna be super apparent. You just have to go with it, and just trust that your ensemble is gonna be there to pick it up where you left off. But yeah, it was a super amazing experience getting to work on that show. It was the first time I got to work as a storyteller and as a character, so it's kind of like jumping in and out from being purely outside perspective and just kind of telling what's going on, then to jumping in and being part of it and being a character, and going back and forth sometimes. So that was really a great experience.
The thing is, with 15 Dogs, I found that I love doing the storyteller parts. That was something that just reminded me. It could have just been that I was in second year at that point, and it's my first show on the stage. But it was just the fact that this is more Matthew than I think Matthew knows. You know what I mean? Where it's just
for sure.
It's my theater persona basically on stage telling the story that Andre Alexei wrote and Zach, I guess. But yeah, it was just, and the set. We need to talk about that set because my God,
crazy.
Like just those moving parts. Like I don't know how we did it. I still watch it now and I'm like, wow, how? You know what I mean?
I haven't watched it yet. I don't like watching myself do stuff, but I have the DVD. I don't know why I did it to myself, but I have it just in case ever I get up the courage to watch. But yeah, no, the set was wild. And that took there were so many rehearsals that were dedicated just to set movements, because I don't know if some of you haven't seen it, but basically there was no actual set, because what was happening was there were two shows going on at the same time on the same stage, and Arcadia was more of a classic piece that kind of warranted a full set. So it had like this giant back wall and other pieces joining onto it. And when that show wasn't going on, it was all flown up above the stage. So it was all just kind of hanging above us. So to kind of accommodate that, we went with, I don't remember whose decision it was exactly, but we went with just set pieces of like wood boards that were screwed together in different shapes, and then we would work with putting them in different configurations to make like a tree, or to make like a boardwalk, or I think at one point there was a bus, maybe I could be misremembering that, but yeah, all these different configurations of like, there are some like long pieces, there was one long L-shaped piece, there were some like ZS-shaped pieces, and they would like slide into each other. And I remember Matthew and I, as well as I think it was Alex, were a tree in one scene, and we had to make sure that we were in sync. We would have to go in from two different entrances on the stage, and we would have to just go right to our spot, know that we were going right to this spot that was on the floor, and snap into place, holding these pieces, and just hold it for the whole scene. And the scene was maybe like 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity because we're all in there like super close, tight up. I think we're all like just kind of like sandwiched together, the three of us. And yeah, it was a great experience because it really teaches you like, oh, when you're not in a scene, you can still be contributing a lot, but without pulling focus. You know, like you can find, like, even if you're not holding set pieces to be the set, if you're just a character that happens to be in a scene, but you're not the main focus, you can still add to it. You know, even if you're technically part of the background, you're still there. People still see you. So you have to make sure that you're focused and that you're doing exactly what you have to do. Because if you're doing too much, then you're going to pull focus. If you're kind of not doing enough and you're just kind of sitting there and just kind of waiting out until your next line, then you're also pulling focus. So you have to just make sure you're focused so that you don't pull the audience's focus.
And that's the thing too. I found that especially in 15 Dogs, like you didn't really have time to check a line. You had no time to really focus on the lines per se. Like you needed to know your lines, because if you didn't, the next time you had to go on, you're like, oh my God, okay. And usually it'd be a paragraph, because there was, you had to describe everything, right?
Yeah.
Especially in that, where you were a storyteller. But yeah, like it almost felt like an assembly line. Like everything just needed to happen at this time. But so great. Like even like you and Adrian had to put the road going across, and just you guys going back and forth was choreographed so beautifully.
Yeah, it took a lot of work, but we got it, and when we got it, it was great. Yeah.
Honestly, like just all the little things, like it reminds you that theater, especially nowadays, we were just talking about a chip on the shoulder, basically. It's very collaborative. It's a moving piece that everyone needs to have a part in. And when they do, it comes together to make something beautiful. Like 15 Dogs, I still hear about it. My family still talks about it because it was so incredible. It really was.
Yeah, it was a great show. And I think honestly what really helped was the source material, because the book was written so beautifully. Like the author's language is so descriptive, and it really sets the scene so well, and it also helps you get into the minds of the characters and see what they're thinking and feeling, and explaining why things are happening in the story without being too obvious, like this is happening because of this. He really goes into what matters. And I think the most important part was, similar to Shakespeare, you have to make sure that you stick to the language, because when you improvise, people can kind of tell that something's off. Even if they don't know exactly what's happening, they're like, oh, that doesn't really sound right. They kind of think, oh, well, but that's not the same quality of language as the rest of the show. So you have to make sure you know your lines, and you have to make sure that you have to be in it, you have to be invested in it enough that you're telling the story and not just speaking words. Because that's what I think I had trouble with, because I had the opening line of the show, and it was just kind of cut down from the original. I think it was maybe 2 sentences originally, and in the book it was the same thing, about the gods Hermes and Apollo in the Wheat Sheaf Tavern in New York. Not New York, in Toronto. Sorry. In Toronto. And then it got cut down to like 3 statements, not even really sentences, just the Wheat Sheaf Tavern on whatever street, Toronto. And that was how the show started. And I think right up until the end, I had trouble with how to deliver that, because it's just kind of supposed to be the start of the show, this big thing. You're saying, this is where they are, this is what's happening, go. And it was difficult. It was really difficult to try and get invested into those words, and to get like what's really going on there. But the rest of the show was a bit easier because it was more descriptive.
No, yeah, the entire show, I found that we had like the storytellers telling us what we needed to know, a bit of the background, and then we see it. And you'd always have that bit of background at the beginning. But I wanted to definitely get your mindset in about the beginning, because you had to open the show. Yeah. But yeah, it must have been nerve-wracking, because I know, like, when we were just about to do dress rehearsal, I think half a huge chunk of my text in Act 2 got completely cut.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, because that's the thing, Zach had to cut it, right?
Yeah.
And especially at the end, where I think everyone was on eggshells. And to start off the show for you had to be nerve-wracking, because that's when he cut it, right? That's when he cut it. So it was just, okay, well, let's go. Okay, well, what do I need to say? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I remember every show I was really nervous about it. So I made sure that I was ready way in advance. I was in the right headspace of like, okay, it's just the start of the show. You just have to say your lines. You have to go out there and do it. Make sure you're in the right spot, and just make sure you're there. So I would always make sure that I was ready. I was in costume. I don't think I had any makeup for that show at all. So I was just in costume. I went to sit on my side of the stage, and I sat there and I just did some breathing, not really breathing exercises, but I just breathed. And I got into the world of the show. And what was really important to me actually was to make sure that when I was doing something for a storyteller, I was the storyteller at that moment. And when I was on as my character, I had to be in that space. So there was actually one moment where one of the fellow actors came up to me, and some people like to prepare with other people before the show, and that's fine, but make sure that the other person is okay with that. Because there was one show where I was sitting and I was just breathing and I was just trying to, get ready for it. And then this other actor came up to me and started trying to pull me into this little preparation thing. And that was actually hurting my preparation. So not to say that I'm upset with them, because, it happens. It's in the past now. I told them afterwards, like, I got to keep them separate, because that's just what works for me. And they understood completely. So it's just another piece of advice, is like, everyone prepares for a show in their own way. If you want to work with someone else to get into it, that's fine, but you have to ask them. You have to get their permission, because if you just assume and you pull them into it, sometimes they might not feel comfortable saying, hey, this isn't helping me. I really don't want to do this. So they might go along with it, and then it hurts the show overall. So you got to remember that you got to keep the show in mind, what's best for the show as a whole, not just what's best for you.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, you really have to prioritize both people's time. You know what I mean? Because especially at the beginning of a show, many people prepare differently. You know what I mean? And it definitely, it's that coming together in the time that works for both of you. You know what I mean? And especially, like breathing techniques and stuff like that. Like, I know if in my last show that I did, 15 Dogs, I didn't really do too much. I was doing stuff very similar to you. But it was, for my last show, I had like 3 different accents to do. I had so many lines to prepare that I don't think I had time to run anything with anyone else. You know what I mean? And if they wanted to, I would have to say, I'm sorry, like, thank you, like, because I know we need to do this, but not tonight if possible, or like, can we do it at this other time? You know what I mean? It's definitely one of those things that you don't want to step on other people's feet, but it's definitely something that everyone prepares differently over the course of every show. It could change like the wind, for sure.
Yeah. I remember when we did Crucible, actually, I would do some preparation with one of the other actors, because our characters, I think basically the only time I was ever on was with this other actor. And so these characters had a lot to do with each other. So it did kind of help me in that sense, to prepare with him. But yeah, it like you said, it changes like the wind. So you can't, just because it was okay one time doesn't mean it's going to be the same every time.
Exactly. And I'm actually going to change now into, unfortunately, our last two questions. But we're going to go from gods to the devil, because the devil is coming on next episode. Yes. Vincent Vogdage will be joining us. He played Lucifer in Dr. Faustus, so he'll be joining us on episode 22 of the Little Thespian podcast. So there you guys go. You guys have been asking about him and wanting him on here because he does dance, he does singing, the man does everything. So we're going to talk about it in episode 22 of the Little Thespian podcast. So my second to last question is, what is in the future for Corey? Are you thinking you're doing acting? You think you're going to be jumping more into tech? What's in your future, you think?
Yeah. So right now, I think in this time right now with the pandemic and everything, that's probably the scariest question to ask anyone, because everything's so uncertain. We're kind of just like floating here, trying to see what's going to happen next. So it's hard to actually make concrete plans. But right now, as it stands, this would have been my third year in the tech program. But I decided, because we moved to online learning, that it wasn't really going to be benefiting me in the way that I needed it to. So I dropped out of the program and enrolled just in some gen ed courses because I had a few left over. So that my plan was to do gen eds and then go back into theater next year. And hopefully by next year things would be better, but I don't know exactly what the status is on that. Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed. But I don't know how things are going. I still actually I have to plan a meeting with some of the faculty just to kind of touch base and see what's going to happen. What are the plans for the future? But outside of school, I think that what I want to do right now is more tech-based, specifically with stage managing, because I had mentioned earlier, that's really what drew me to go from acting into tech, was seeing, because my friend Clara, who I went to high school with, was in the program, and she was our stage manager for 15 Dogs. And so I because I was close with her, I got to kind of get a sneak peek into what actually happens behind the scenes. And I realized that there was so much more to it than I knew there was, than I realized. And a lot of it was the kind of thing that I never thought of, but it really appealed to me. So that's been my main focus this whole time for the past, it's been almost 3 years, but really for the past 2 years in school. The management classes have always been like the one thing that really kept me going through it. So I think that's something that I want to do. And I don't know how this is going to work now with COVID, but another thing I really wanted to do was work on a show that travels. Even if it's across the country, if it's to another country, even better. But I haven't really had an opportunity to travel much in my life. So if I got to work on a show that even just toured a few provinces in the country, then I think that would be an amazing experience, and that's something I really want to do.
Sounds great, man. And I honestly, you know what I'm thinking? The minute you said traveling show, I don't know what popped into my mind, but I think Shakespeare, what's it called? Shakespeare in the Park, excuse me, actually tours. So that might be something you might want to hop into.
For sure, yeah. Actually, I think I have some friends that worked on that, and they toured with it as well. So I'll have to speak to them.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I know your future is bright, man. You have so many things. Like I said, you're a man of many talents. You wear many hats, and I'm so glad you could be on this episode. It's been great talking to you. But before I shed a light on Corey, as I do with every guest, I'm going to ask you my final question, which is, excuse me, what show would you like to do as an actor, and what show would you like to do as a person in tech?
I think honestly, I think I'd want to do Gut Girls, because when we did the Crucible, we were also doing a double show that semester. So the other show was the Gut Girls, and I thought it was a great piece. It's about feminism. It's about women's rights, set in like the Edwardian period, and it really shows you, like the way that women were treated, the way that they had to behave, and like the standards that they were expected to meet, and the consequences of them, of all that as well. And I was kind of, I enjoyed working on the Crucible so much, but I was still a little bit bummed that I didn't get to do Gut Girls, because it just seemed like such a fun show to do, no matter, like, even if it was just as heavy as Crucible. It seemed like that cast had a lot of fun. I would have liked to be part of it. And also the show just by itself, it's a really great show. It involves accents, which I love working with. Unless it's Welsh. I think I'm good to step away from the Welsh accent for maybe the rest of my life. But yeah, I think I'd really want to do Gut Girls. I think I auditioned for, I can't remember his name, but he's kind of like the companion of Lady Helena. I think his name was Edward something, maybe. But yeah, I think I auditioned originally for that character, but any of the characters in the show would be great to play. Yeah, so that's for acting. For tech, honestly, just about any show. I just want to do it. I just want to jump in. I just want to be part of it, because I think that's really what's in it for me. Is like I at this point, I don't really care what I do. I just know that I really want to work in theater. I think it's the world that I'm built for. It's the world that I need to have it in my life. So I think whatever the show is, I just want to be part of it. I want to do whatever I can to get it up and get it going and to make it as good as it can possibly be.
That's a lovely way to end this episode, because this show is all about the love of acting and the love of theater in general, because we've had many guests that have done acting. We have many guests that have done stuff behind the scenes. And now you and Molly have both been on the show, and you guys have done both. And it's so great when those two things connect. Yeah. And especially, it just shows how much you guys love theater and love what you guys do. To do the amount of years that you guys have done in the theater program. I know a lot of people don't want to jump into another 3 years, but it just shows how passionate you are about your craft. And with that being said, let's shine a light on Corey. So Corey, man, you're, like I said, lovely guy. He literally wears all hats, guys. He does acting, he does tech, and my God, I cannot wait to see the amazing future he has, because it is super bright. And you are so welcome, man. And please come on anytime you can, because it's great talking to you. And also, guys, before we sign off, I just want to let you guys know we did do a Shakespeare sit-downs. Hopefully, Corey can join us again on another Shakespeare sit-downs, because, my God, guys, great episode here on the Little Thespian podcast. Thank you, Corey, for being on, bud.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys on the next Little Thespian podcast. Bye, Corey.
Bye.
The lights are off. The curtain has fallen. And it's time to say goodbye. Thank you all for joining us on the Little Thespian podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to ask, either down below or on any of our platforms. We apologize for the little hiatus that we took, but we're back here this December. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce that our first guest will be that of Vincent Vogdage on the next episode of the Little Thespian podcast. We're going to talk all things acting, all things theater, all things dance, singing, and beyond in episode 22 of the Little Thespian podcast with the amazingly talented Vincent Vogdage. I cannot wait to talk to Vince, and I cannot wait for this amazing December schedule to grace your screens, guys. We have amazing content coming out, and we just posted our first Shakespeare sit-downs, of which Corey was a part of. Thank you, Corey, for being on this episode of the Little Thespian Podcast, and thank you for joining us on our first Shakespeare sit-downs. If you guys want to show some more support, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out tremendously, guys. And like I said, there's much more coming. And December is a jam-packed month full of amazing content. Don't forget to ring the bell to stay notified on all of that. This has been your host, Matthew Crandall, telling you guys to always shine bright, even in the darkest of days. There is something just along the way. Thank you all for watching, and this has been your host, once again, Matthew Crandall, telling you guys to shine bright, and we'll see you all on the next Little Thespian Podcast.